All right, everyone, let the coping begin. This is Captain Beefy with the Game Vault. We've got an article from Polygon today from Maddie Myers. Did Dragon Age the Veilguard undersell or face unrealistic expectations? Not every game could be a mega hit. That shouldn't spell doom. Wow. The other day, the president, or one of the big guys, top brass at EA, said it was because a lack of multiplayer or live service aspects of the game is why the game didn't sell. Let's see what the excuses are from Maddie. We'll cue up the music and we'll get right to it. All right, so this is not the first time I've written about a video game that appears to have been sent out to die, and I predict it will not be the last. The latest victim of the business is Dragon Age the Veilguard, which of course was one of the subjects of Electronic Arts' third quarter's earnings calls on Tuesday with CEO Andrew Wilson. Dragon Age the Veilguard garnered 1.5 million players in the first 2 months after release, according to EA, half of what the company higher-ups expected in that window, or perhaps the better word is needed based on the game's budget. In addition to being available to purchase outright, Veilguard was also available via a $16.99 monthly subscription to EA Play Pro, and that 1.5 million would include those players, so the exact number of units sold is not known. In order to break out beyond the core audience, games need to directly connect to the evolving demands of players who increasingly seek shared world features and deeper engagement alongside high-quality narratives in this beloved category, Wilson said on the call. Dragon Age had a high-quality launch and was well received by critics and those who played. However, it did not resonate with broad enough audience in this highly competitive market. Let's stop right there. All right, first off, it did not need 1.5 million people to play it. It needed to sell 1.5 million copies, is what they said. And in fact, it needed to sell 3 million copies, and it didn't even sell 1.5. It had approximately less than 1.5 million people engaging with it. In addition to the EA Play, it was given away for people who purchased NVIDIA's Ultimate Plan for a certain amount of time. I think it was like $99 for that. It was given away with that. And that number also counts to people who, like myself, have, I have PlayStation Pro, or I have PlayStation and I have PlayStation Plus, and I have multiple consoles in my house, so with multiple accounts on it. So more than one person can play a game on those accounts. So if I had, I've got 3 different accounts in this house, 3 different people could play that game in my house if I had it, which I don't, God forbid. But anyways, so, there's a lot of disparity here with these numbers. 1.5 million engagements. How many actual sales were there? We're not going to know. They're not going to tell us that. I guarantee you that. Anyway, many have zeroed in on the shared world features part of this quote, with some suggesting that Wilson is blaming Veilguard's failure to hit sales targets on its lack of live service elements. Shared world elements would have been out of place in Veilguard, to be sure, but the part I'm fixated on is the last part, when Wilson said that Veilguard did not resonate with a broad enough audience in this highly competitive market. Now, it's no secret that 2024 was a huge year for RPGs, and all of those RPGs had the arguable misfortune of following in the footsteps of the unexpected juggernaut that was Baldur's Gate 3, which sold 2.5 million copies after entering early access in 2020. Since fully launching in 2023, it has sold 15 million copies and is still in Steam's top 20 most played games. Andrew Wilson will hear no argument from me about the highly competitive market for RPGs. That would have been a steep uphill climb for the developers of Dragon Age the Veilguard. But the Veilguard team had already been climbing uphill for years before the game hit the market. It faced multiple redesigns, several high-profile departures, and staff layoffs over the course of its 10-year development. The mere fact that this game took a decade to make would likely have caused its costs to be far more significant than those of other RPGs with which it was competing for players' attention in 2024. To quote Bloomberg reporter And my friend Jason Schreier in this recent article about skyrocketing video game costs. To understand why video game budgets have grown so rapidly, you have to understand where that money is actually going. Paying people salaries. So if you have 300 employees and you're estimating 20 grand a month for each one, we've got to pay good wages to compete in 2025. You're spending $72 million a year. So we're paying employees $250,000 a year to make video games. I find that hard to believe. Maybe I'm out of touch. I don't know. You guys tell me if that's the case. Are these guys making $250,000 a year? Because they all act like they're poor and crying all the time that they, about the crunch and all that. If you're making $250,000 a year, you should be putting out some damn good games that are complete and working when they come out, not this crap that comes out every year. You should be writing dialogue that makes sense and not this garbage and this drivel that we're getting. Putting out games like Veilguard, which is just a stupid-ass trauma dump. Maybe one guy is making $250,000 and everybody else is making, 50, 60, something like that. But geez. Anyway, we don't know the exact salaries for all the employees who came and went over the course of Veilguard's development, but it seems fair to say that its budget likely ballooned during its long, tumultuous production. So there's something to be said about that, yeah. My understanding is this game was going to be live service at some point. Then it went back to single player. Who knows if it flip-flopped back and forth between that at different times. I mean, whoever was in charge of this project, the lead throughout the whole thing, I don't know if it was that dude Andrew that goes by the name of Corian Bush or not, if he was the one, I mean, he's the director of the game, but was he ultimately in charge of the entire thing the whole time, or was he just the director? Whatever the case may be, when you flip-flop like that, yeah, it's going to make the game, it's going to balloon the budget because you've developed all this stuff that's now suddenly worthless, right? Maybe you can use it down the road on a different game, but, well, you're not using it on this current game, so you've spent the money, the time, and the development cost to create it, and it's worthless, right? At least for now. So it's a loss. And then if you flip back to another type thing and you're going back and forth and these design changes happen a few times down the road, well, yeah, that can accumulate. Look at Skull and Bones. And that, I understand, went through several changes down the line, and that was really, that one hurt. Ubisoft. Anyway, for further comparison, Metaphor ReFantazio had a similarly long development cycle, having first been announced in 2016. Last October, publisher Sega announced that it had sold 1 million copies of the game. Not so different from Veilguard's numbers, except it wasn't considered a failure. Let's go to another example. The sales of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, about which Square Enix higher-ups have been tight-lipped. This was a sequel, so the comparison might not feel entirely fair, but it is from 2024, so it was definitely competing for players' attention alongside those other RPGs. Rebirth had a 4-year development cycle and has been widely described as underperforming after early estimates placed it at 2 million copies sold. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth recently came to Windows PC via Steam and appears to be doing quite well there, but we're only talking about early sales numbers here. They're skating around the issue here, and let's see if they ever talk about it, and then we'll talk about that. Another 2024 RPG, Dragon's Dogma 2, took 5 years to develop. This game was considered a huge success for Capcom, selling 2.5 million copies in its first 11 days post-release. The game eventually hit a milestone of 3.3 million in October 2024, but based on EA's metrics and expectations as shared by its earning calls, those early numbers are key. And one more, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, took 3 years to develop, and it sold 1 million units in its first week, according to a proud news release describing it as the fastest-selling title in the series. So why would Veilguard be considered a failure by comparison in terms of player numbers? As our closest approximation of units sold, it's in the ballpark of what might expect of other RPGs released in the same time period at the $70 price point. The Metaphor ReFantazio comparison seems particularly telling to me, especially given its 8-year development timeline. Again, we can't see under the hood in terms of how much those developers' salaries are actually costing, but we do know that Metaphor hasn't even managed to garner as many players as Veilguard up to this point. And when I Google the words Atlas layoffs, all I can find is this article from 2024 about how the studio raised its workers' salaries. Maybe they have a smaller workforce. I don't know. Maybe there's less waste there. Who knows? Without all those details, yeah, you can only speculate at this point. Maybe they weren't wasting a lot of time and energy on useless aspects of the game and stupid stuff that doesn't belong in a game in this setting. And let's just get right to the point right now. Veilguard did not fail. Okay. It didn't underperform and all that for any other reason than it was a garbage game. That's the bottom line. People hated this game. They despised it. It was pure, utter, woke garbage. That's what it was. And there's no way around it. And anybody who wants to argue against that is a freaking idiot. Okay? You can come into the comments and say what you want about it. If you like it, that's fine. That's your opinion. You're allowed to like it. But your opinion goes against the norm of 99.9% of everybody else out there. Everybody else thinks this is a piece of crap and have wiped their ass with this game because it's pure shit. Okay? It's a trauma dump from Andrew, a.k.a. Corrine Bush, who is some weird trans person who decided to project their life onto this character in Trash or Tash, whatever their name is in the game, coming out as non-binary and trans or whatever they came out as in this game. There were top surgery scars for a transitioned character in a medieval setting. They used modern terminology like non-binary. They lectured people for using the wrong pronouns and made them do a penance of push-ups. I mean, it was the most cringeworthy game of all times. And it's absolutely horrible. Character design was stupid. Dialogue was childish. The list goes on and on. The game was utter bunk. Nothing could have saved this. Microtransactions wouldn't have saved it. Live service things wouldn't have saved it. Nothing would have saved this game other than not releasing it. And then it wouldn't be out there and the Dragon Age name wouldn't be tainted like it is. Right now, this series is dead. This franchise is dead. And there's really no hope in bringing it back anytime soon. They should wait another 10 years before they even start development on another game and let everybody forget this thing ever existed. And then maybe they can bring something out new and start over again, because this, it was like a silver bullet. It really did destroy this franchise. Anyway, the Dragon series was historically successful enough to set high expectations for Veilguard. So let's consider those numbers. Dragon Age Inquisition arrived in 2014 to a very different video game landscape with different costs. It did also go on to be the best-selling Bioware game of all time, eventually hitting 12 million units, a mega blockbuster. EA never released the game's early sales figures, only describing its launch as successful. If we go further back, Dragon Age 2 sold 2 million units in its first 2 months post-release. All this to say, EA CEO Andrew Wilson and the rest of EA leadership didn't just expect Dragon Age the Veilguard to sell on par with the inevitable competition, or even slightly above average. They expected it to be a huge, immediate hit. And they didn't just expect it, they budgeted for it. Even though the entire year of other comparable RPGs leading up to Veilguard proved the unlikelihood of this, those expectations didn't change, and then unsurprisingly, Veilguard failed to meet them. It didn't have to be that way, though. If this was a true Dragon Age game, if they embraced the lore and they embraced the history of the game, and they didn't use all this modern woke nonsense and lecture people about pronouns, and the Tash didn't come out to mom as non-binary and all this other stupid crap, the game would have done much better. They estimated 30,000 returns right off the bat. Almost. The people were bringing it to GameStop and trading it in so fast that the value plummeted there. It's already, I think, 40% off at GameStop to buy it brand new. I think Steam has it on sale. I think the PlayStation Store has it on sale already. It's trash. It never topped 100,000 concurrent players, even its opening weekend. I expected it to at least top that based off its name alone. I was wrong. I didn't expect it to do good, but I was like, it'll probably hit 100,000 people and then it'll drop off. It dropped off fast, and it's plunged into the abyss. You get a couple thousand people playing it at any given time concurrently on Steam, and that's nothing for a franchise that was as beloved as this. I've gone onto the Reddit, and there are people that love the game, and more power to them, but they are the quote-unquote modern audience, and there's not many of them out there. If you want to make a game for the modern audience, then feel free to do it. But don't take 10 years and spend hundreds of $1,000,000 doing it, because you're going to fail. And you're inevitably going to end up firing your developers like EA has done with Bioware. You're going to end up gutting a studio. People are going to lose their jobs and their livelihoods and be spread to the four winds. All that to cater to a modern audience that barely exists. Bad news. And Andrew Wilson, you're a freaking moron, dude. They ought to shit can you right now and replace you with somebody that doesn't have their head completely up their ass. Anyway, even though the game performed just as well as it ordinarily would have for the type of game that it is in the time period which it was released, Bioware still got hit with a post-release restructuring and layoffs. The team size is estimated to be just 100 people now, under 100 people, because Veilguard needed to be not just a success, but a massive success. It needed to become that successful in a year that also had multiple other amazing RPG releases. Other amazing RPG. Veilguard was not an amazing RPG release. It was trash preceding it. It needed to do that after having one of the most infamously tortured development cycles I've heard about in my entire journalistic career. Maybe the game didn't resonate with a broad enough audience in this highly competitive market, but highly competitive expectations seem like an undeniable factor too. Oh my God. Yeah, there we go. They corrected. Engaged approximately 1.5. Okay. It had a bad cycle and all that as far as getting released and all that. But so did Dead Island 2, right? Dead Island 2 has an infamously bad. It was in hell for a while, in development hell. It came out, it launched, it was nice and stable. It was a great game. People loved it. It wasn't broken. It wasn't full of all this woke garbage and nonsense. It was a lot of fun, and it was successful. You know, I mean, it's not the same type of game by any stretch of the imagination, but my God, it can be done. And I know it made money. It had two successful, fairly, not big DLCs, but they were, moderately sized DLCs for the size of the game. I mean, these guys immediately abandoned any opportunity to do a DLC for this game. They said, they threw it out there on the market. They said, oh boy, everybody hated it. Andrew jumped off the ship and ran off to Wizards of the Coast to go get a job with them right away. EA came in and cut the heads off of half the staff and got rid of them. Just left a skeleton crew to start working on Mass Effect 5, which incidentally is probably going to have some live service elements in it based off of what Andrew Wilson is saying. And if it does, that game's dead in the water. I don't know what to say, guys. Anyway, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring that bell for notification. This is just cope, man. I mean, this is total cope, Maddie. Just admit the game was trash. We'll see you next time. Until then, peace.